Alright, what's up you guys, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Eddie G. I am a photographer and filmmaker, and today I am very excited to test out this new iPhone 14 Pro in the city, on the streets, and find out if this camera can kind of qualify as a main compact street photography camera. Right now, a lot of the competition is really between the Ricoh GR3 or the 3X and the Fuji X100V, amongst a larger variety of cameras. But the iPhone is something that a lot of just creative people and photographers have on them at all times, and I've always wanted to use my iPhone as a camera, but I've always kind of just not been as interested in using it. One, because of just the lower resolution, the 12 megapixels. But now that this phone has a higher resolution, it really just intrigued me and made me want to try it out and see just how it can compare with those other cameras. Yes, it's a higher quality megapixels count. We're just gonna go with megapixel count than the other cameras, my Fuji X100V or Ricoh GR3 that's only like a 26 or 24 megapixel camera, but this one has a little bit of higher resolution. Now I am gonna try and focus on using only the main 48 megapixel camera and shoot raw photos. So yeah, all in all, I'm just excited to be out here, excited to be able to create. Out a little later than I wanted to, just trying to get some things situated with the phone at home, but all is set up, so let's get to it. So a few other things that I want to figure out with this camera is, can I create a workflow around this? I don't want this to kind of be a tool in my bag. That's just a one-shot use. Use it to, say, produce this video, or just use it to catch photos every now and again. I want it to be a solution for me where if I don't feel like carrying around one of my main cameras, I can use my iPhone. After about close to an hour here, I will say a few things. One, just shooting street photography that is like people-based is hard, because you can't really just come out one day and then hope to get like great photos. You really have to be out here multiple times, putting in your reps. That said, so far using this camera has been kind of interesting. It's been a little difficult. I'm warming up, trying to get into my comfort zone a lot when I'm approaching subjects like people, but if I'm doing anything like photographing buildings and stuff, I feel like I can take my time, obviously a lot more, because I'm not nervous of the way the building's gonna react. I see a photo, hold on. All right, so one issue I'm finding so far with this camera, and really it's kind of the only issue, is that it's kind of slow. Not all the time, it's just sometimes when I'm taking a photo, when I'm approaching a subject and trying to be a little discreet about it, I find myself hitting the shutter button, but it not taking the photo. Like, it'll just kind of be loading for a second and then take the photo. So by that time, I've already like moved the camera away and kind of lost the moment. So this definitely isn't something that you can use in a situation where you're burst firing, taking a lot of photos at once. You really have to kind of take your time, plan out your composition. Well, I wouldn't say plan out your composition, but approach your subject carefully, and when you press that shutter button, hopefully it actually takes the photo. I am kind of bummed that unfortunately, like, I got out here a little later than I wanted to, mainly because of the time I was able to get my phone and like finally get it set up. So I'm definitely gonna have to come back out again and try and like explore more of the city when I have a lot more light and shadow, because right now it's pretty dim, it's pretty dark everywhere. There's no good harsh shadows that I can really play with. But right now I'm just kind of exploring a lot of architecture and trying to just find photos like that. I don't really consider myself an architectural street photographer. I'm working on it, practicing. I feel like I'm getting slightly better, but for the most part, that's really all I have to kind of play with on day one. One other thing that I know a lot of people are concerned about with this setup, specifically using an iPhone for street photography, specifically this iPhone 14 Pro, is battery life. I got out here, I've been out here for about an hour, started off with a 91% charge, about a 91, 92% charge, and I'm actively like shooting photos and video, and right now I'm only about 67%, and that is after an entire hour of actively shooting. Of course, I'm not texting or watching videos and using a phone for anything else like that whilst I'm out, but for the most part, seems to be holding up pretty decently. I usually do about 4 or 5 hour session here in Denver, and so, you know, it can be useful to me to carry a mobile battery, which I actually like have in here to help charge the phone, so I'm not necessarily worried about losing power whilst I'm out making photos and videos.
Baby, don't go flame. I just switched the lanes. Danny did it again. I just flipped the pain. Stripping and dipping and bait. Slap on everything. Swimming, you taking away. Cause I got big racks coming. I put my low racks on it. I ain't skip past losses. I had to get back off it. See the fit lab on it until I whip my pump. Money clip by toast it out. It's big bags on big bags on big bags coming. Coming in. Yeah. Flex. I just wanna win. Yeah. LA baby, running with. Yeah. 2, 2, 3, 3. I'm on 10 again. Pump up that big bags coming. Coming in. Yeah. Flex. I just wanna win. Yeah. LA baby, running with. Yeah. 2, 2, 3, 3. I'm on 10 again. Pump up the action. Okay, alright. Okay, alright. I'm on 10 again. Okay, I'm on 10 again.
Good form. It's looking good over here, ladies. My side's going strong. I see no shaking. That last
What's
side,
our time? What's our time?
they were at 45 seconds.
So that wraps up the end of day 2. I've had so much fun using this phone just full on as my camera for the past 2 days, using it as my professional camera to do street photography and make this entire video. I'm simply just impressed by what this camera can do. I've kind of just been wowed the entire time, and I truly think it's worth like picking up if you're kind of on the edge of using it. I don't know, you know, what your situation may be, what phone you own, but in my opinion, this phone almost feels like it can be a full-on content creation tool. There's a lot of things that I still need to figure out with this camera in terms of just how to really get full control and just understand what the best result is that I can get, as I kind of just took this straight out the box, figured out how to turn on cinematic mode at 24 frames a second for my video, and then turn on Apple Pro RAW and use the proper camera for my photos. On day 1, the main issue that I think I ran into was that I was underexposing everything by 1 stop. So if you take the exposure meter when you're taking photos and you drag it to -1, for those of you who don't know, that is underexposing your images by full stop, and you do that to protect the highlights. This phone and these images, you can regain a lot of detail in the shadows. So if you're in a super bright situation, I feel like you can, you know, shoot like that and bring back the results. But at the time of day I was shooting, it was really dim, and a lot of the photos seemed to kind of have this high ISO noise issue where they looked kind of grainy and they didn't look like a 48 megapixel photo at first. But the second day I went out, I compensated for that by bringing the exposure up a little bit, only to -3. And I feel like the results I got then looked a lot more better, but I still need to figure out how just this camera really works and what situations it kind of thrives in the best, as of course it's not a traditional camera and I can't control all the specific features how I would truly want to. And I don't necessarily expect that from a phone. You know, it can only do so much, but I mean, with the way technology kind of moves these days, and I know there's other apps out there that you can use, you know, I won't be surprised if we have that feature in the next iPhone. So one thing I mentioned earlier, and this is my biggest complaint with photo mode specifically, is that when you're shooting in that 48 megapixels, it's slow. When you hit that shutter, if you're a street photographer and you're trying to capture a moment happening fast, or let's say you're at an event and you just want to capture a moment, or you want to capture your child, a friend, anything. When you press that shutter, there's about a second to a second and a half, almost 2 second delay before you can press the shutter again. And now another issue is that once you hit that shutter, when you're waiting for it to kind of buffer and load your photo, and I understand it's high resolution 96 megabyte files, you're really gonna just lose time. That moment's gonna pass you by. So a workaround I think I almost figured out today was slowing down and just anticipating the moment, letting a subject walk towards me, and before that moment kind of fully unravels in front of me, hit that shutter beforehand so that I can capture the photo. A lot of times today and yesterday, I had moments where I would just bring up the camera, or I was even holding the camera up, so I'm not getting any dramatic exposure changes. I hit the shutter button and it just did not take the photo. It took the photo a second later, a second and a half later, and I ended up missing the moment. One other weird issue I had in photo mode, and I'm not sure what happened, one of my fingers may have been covering one of the cameras if I was holding it with two hands, because that ultra wide is so wide, it may have just like picked up my finger and thought I was trying to do macro focus. But in this photo that I'll put on screen here, you can just see it looks terrible. Something went drastically wrong. I'm not sure what happened. I wasn't necessarily paying attention to the buffer or the camera, because it was such bright light. I couldn't necessarily see the screen, and I feel like the phone was kind of dimming itself, even though I checked, you know, the brightness on the phone and it was at full power. It was just kind of hard to see in that harsh daylight. And yeah, I just couldn't tell what happened with this specific photo. It only happened to me twice. Now, as far as video mode, and I'm gonna definitely dive into this in a different video, the main issue I was kind of running into there was the aperture. Controlling the aperture and controlling like the depth of field effect that happens with kind of just this AI aperture that's in these phones. A lot of times if there's multiple faces, and obviously if you're doing something like street photography, you're gonna have tons of faces in your shot. That camera's hunting all around. If somebody's closer or further, we're picking up signals that it's capturing multiple faces at once, and I found just the focus hunting all over the place, up to a point in some areas where it almost looked like the camera was tilt shift focusing, and it just looked off and weird. So a lot of times I found myself just bringing that aperture up to 5.6 and really getting a decent, I guess, good enough result with that camera. So that's all I have to share with you guys today in terms of using this camera as just a full-on photo and video content creation tool. I have so much more plans to use this camera and really push it to its limits. So if you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate it if you go check out my other work, and definitely hit that like button and consider subscribing, because I have more coming. Thank you guys for watching. Catch you in the next one.